Hoskins, and this is ISpy with my little eye, Canva projects galore. Today I'm going to share with you some information about how to create your own ISpy using Canva. This is something that I started doing recently when I was browsing online for an ISpy worksheet to use in my library. I like to keep coloring pages and word searches and things like that available at all times so that students can take it with them whenever they would like. I had one of my eighth grade library aides working with me, and she was looking alongside as I searched and did not care for any of the things that we were finding. Um, because of that, I decided that it would be really nice to create our own ISpy that was inspired by our middle school students and the things that they like. Earlier on this year, I had adapted an ISpy that one of my colleagues had made, a winter ISpy, and I had used her design to start creating my own winter ISpy for our library, adapted it just a little bit, made a few little switch arounds and changes, and so I knew already essentially how I wanted to put it together. And so I started working on ISpy things I love. She gave me several suggestions. We looked for things that we knew would be pretty common. We put together a Stanley Cup. We looked for Crocs and Jordans and AirPods and a lot of the things that we knew that other students maybe would have asked for as gifts over our winter break, or just things that we hear them talk about or know that they like all of the time. Um, as I worked on it on another morning shortly after that, one of my advisement students looked at it and saw it said things I love. And she said, I love food. Can cheeseburgers be on there? And so cheeseburgers went on along with some other food items like boba tea and pizza and ice cream and things like that that I know that my students love. And so everything that was on here was something that linked back to them, which I think is really important when you're thinking about putting together an ISpy of your own, that it is things that are unique or special in some way. It does take quite a bit of time to put these together. And so it really needs to be kind of a labor of love. That almost seems like a dramatic way to say it, but it really is something that I put a lot of thought into as I create. And I want it to feel special to my students when they look at it. Even though they're not going to know that I made it for them, I still want them to feel excited about it when they see it. Um, I had decided right after I made this one that I probably was not going to make any more for a very long time, because it did take quite a bit of my time. However, it probably only took a week and a half or so after completing this first one that I decided to make a second one because I had inspiration strike. And that was in the form of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. I live in Missouri near the Kansas City area. And so this is something that is really big and talked about where I live. And so I have several students who are super into it and following their relationship and everything about them. And since many of them were Chiefs fans already, along with being Taylor Swift fans, it was something that joined together very easily in our area. And so I decided that I wanted to put this together, knowing that they would be really excited to see it, and just again something that was unique and special for my students. And so I spent time finding icons that were linked to Taylor and to Travis. He is a little more difficult to find a large number of icons to represent, at least he was for me, not knowing as much about him, whereas Taylor Swift, you can find all kinds of things about her online and things that would symbolize her. But I put in a lot of time to creating that for them and for my students. It has gone over very well, and I think several other librarians have had an opportunity to use it and have given me the feedback that their students are enjoying it also. And so again, it's that special or unique thing that makes it worth putting the time in to create these. For this presentation, I decided to go ahead and make a third one. And so for that, I had, before I ever finished the first one, had started to put sports items on it and decided that they could probably be their own ISpy. So I just said that things should be special or unique. Sports is a little bit more general and generic. However, I wanted my basis for this one to be sports that my students have talked about, participating in, being a part of, watching, or being very interested in. So just all things that I felt would connect back to my students in some way. And so when you go to start searching for those things, I search the Canva elements for um, things that I want along with the keywords like line art or icon. Those are the ones that seem to work the best for me. And so I might search for something like hockey line art or hockey icon. And then once you start searching for those things, there's also a couple of additional tricks. One, in that left hand navigation of Canva, it'll have those magic recommendations. And so a lot of times, those would be something that I also could use. Or when you have selected something on your screen, the eye at the top of the page will allow you to click on it and then search for more like this. And so a lot of times those were also going to be things that would work well, whether it was because it was an additional, in the example, maybe something about tennis that I could include, or just something by the same artist, because you can also click view more by whoever the artist is. And often it's going to be similar types of things that will fit well with your theme. And so while I do that, I also keep in mind things that I want to be special for my students. So, for example, in ISpy Things I Love, there wasn't anything that really looked exactly like a Stanley Cup. So I combined a couple of things to create that. In the case of the Travis and Taylor ISpy, I created the things that you can see here by combining, again, all elements that are inside of Canva. I'm not pulling anything from the outside because I want to make sure that when I'm sharing this with other librarians, that copyright isn't a concern for them. And so what I'm doing is I'm searching within those elements to find the bits and pieces to put together something that's identifiable, and hopefully something that my students will recognize and appreciate. In this case, I have the Taylor Swift Polaroid there from 1989. It isn't exact because there wasn't an element of the girl that looks quite like she does in the original that inspired it, but I knew that my students would still recognize what it was meant to be. Same thing, Kansas City Chiefs. It's not a perfect font. I do upload fonts sometimes. This one happened to be a built-in one. And then the sweater is just a sweater icon with stars added onto the sleeves to represent her recognizable sweater that you see pretty often on things lately. And so those custom things, again, are just things that I do because I feel like it makes it a little bit more special and fun for my students because they're going to see something that is readily identifiable to them. For the sports that I've done, I didn't do anything that was unique or special. I was able to use all built-in icons to create the things that I wanted to. Now, that said, I could go back into it and maybe add like my school logo if I wanted to add something that really felt connected for them. In the sports option, one of the things that I like to do is get everything kind of laid out, make sure I've chosen everything that I like. Even though I know I'm probably going to have to go back in and add more, I like to be able to kind of see what I have and build from there. In this case, this page is something that I created that could be an alternate way to use your ISpy. For example, if you were to print something poster size, you could post this next to it of things that they can look for and count. So instead of having the things across the bottom in the key, you could create basically a separate key that maybe included even more items on it than what you typically do on the worksheet itself. Something that could go with something larger, or that can be printed as like a half or quarter sheet to go along with the paper sized one if you were doing it in class. Just something that you can have as an alternative way to use it that might mix it up a little bit. When you are working with your icons, there are a couple things that I felt worked really well for me. This time, what I did was I put all of the icons that I knew I was going to want them to search for in my box at the bottom with the number of times I was going to have it appear before I ever started putting all of it together on the page. Like I had my initial icons, but I hadn't started copying and pasting anything yet. And so those are all in the bottom down there. You can see the number of times I plan for them to show up, and then all of the other things up above. These are much smaller than they were on that previous screen because at this point I had started to think about sizing. And so I try to adjust them to all be within a range of about zero point 0.3 to zero point 0.7 inches by clicking on the position button, which opens up the arrange menu and gives you the option to change the sizing of something to be something more a specific size. And so one thing that's important is you want to make sure that lock is clicked on the ratio button. And then you can enter that size, see how things look at different sizes. In my case, I went ahead this time and just highlighted everything I had at the beginning and put it all at the same size together. Uh, Once you've done that, you can kind of see how things look and make some individual adjustments. But I do like to make most of my sizing adjustments before I start to copy and paste things because once you start copying and pasting, you don't necessarily want to have to go back and find all of that same item again within the page so that you can resize it if you change your mind. It's definitely flexible and everybody works a different way. I just try my best to learn tricks and techniques to make it faster as I go. And so this one was definitely the one I put together the fastest. The first one took me a very long time. Taylor and Travis was a little quicker. And then this one was pretty quick overall. Once you've kind of made a base size for everything, it's time to start making your copies of stuff. This time around, I decided to try putting in a copy and paste of everything I wanted to them to search for in the number that I was going to appear from the beginning. I'm not sure if this is the way I would do it again, but it definitely was a technique that worked out well in terms of having all of the pieces there so that I could start arranging them and know that I was not going to make any additional copies of these particular items as I went. This was a change from how I had done it in the previous iterations. And again, I did do it faster, but it felt a little more difficult to arrange things when I was first starting. Once I got going, though, it was really nice to know I was done with these searchable items. So when you start moving things around, I really kind of start by working towards the outer edge and the center, which is why, like I said, this may not have been a perfect way for me to do it because the center area that I like to build out from was blocked in a little bit. And so I really do just start by moving things around the page, um, tilting them, moving them in different areas, and trying to make sure that I'm not always clumping the same things together, and I'm giving them all a little bit of space around each other to live. And so as I do that, it is for sure for me not an exact science. I can definitely see where for some people you might want to make a little grouping, copy that whole group, paste it together somewhere, and then kind of do a little rearranging. But I definitely worked mostly with individual pieces here. And that might be something that would save time, though, if you did something a little bit differently in terms of how you went about copying and pasting as groups instead of individual pieces. Once I had all of those things spread out, it was then time for me to start copying and pasting all of the things that I had on the page that were not going to be countable items. And so you can see here that kind of idea that I had started more towards the edges and then began to work my way, in, but also had some stuff grouped in the center. And part of that is just wanting things to be spread out across the area. As I go, I do move things around. Like these are not their permanent homes, and there's a lot of tilting of items to fit into spaces. There's a lot of nudging things around so that there's maybe a little bit bigger gap and things don't look crowded. And again, I think I said earlier, maybe in this time or maybe on a previous attempt to record this, that I do get fussy about things sometimes. And so I probably spend more time on it than a lot of people would because I am being particular about how close items are together. Not like super picky, but I do try to make it look kind of evenly spaced and not crowded and things like that. Once I have everything on those outer edges in the center, and I've worked with all of my original items, I kind of did a review of the page and took a look to see if I could see that I had definitely duplicated everything I put on there originally, that there was nothing that I only had a single one of them on the page. In this case, I for sure had um, everything there, and that meant that it was time to search for some additional icons. That's something that has happened to me every single time. I find out um, every single time. This is the third one I've done. But I do find out each time that it's going to take more than I realized it was going to need. And so, one of those things that I'm looking for, and you can kind of see them right here, these little stars, I consider those filler. So, there's something that I could probably make 15, 20 of to fill into spaces, but they are going to take up a lot of room, and they're going to make it easier to fill in my page. In this case, I also decided I wanted something additional for tennis, so I searched for another tennis ball icon to go with the tennis racket I already had, and started arranging those on the page as well. As I do that, I'm going to move things around and find new homes and just continue to work my way both in from the edges and out from the center until everything begins to meet. As I do this, there's going to be times when I pull something that was maybe on the edge to begin with and nudge it into some of this empty space, and then flip something new to the edges, just so that everything becomes kind of intermingled as I'm adding new elements to it. And so on this screen, you can see that those stars that I added after I had already begun, there's some at the far edges of it because I've kind of moved things around and made them fit so that they're not all just grouped in a more central area together. For spacing, I do spend some time on making sure that things aren't too tight. I mentioned that, and that's really a big one for me because not only do I not want things to be too tight, I also want to fill in that space without having to make too many copies of things. And so, or to continue finding new things. And so sometimes when I look at it, I can realize I have a lot of stuff grouped really closely together. And if I start moving things around, doing a little bit more tilting and shifting, that it can take up a little more room and actually look a little bit nicer, but fill in a gap that I have with what I have done to that point. And so it really is just continuing to do that, searching for more things that you want to fill the page until finally you have something that you're satisfied with. And so here you can see this one is complete. Um, Looking at it on my screen here, the resolution, and so I'm not sure what the recording will show. The resolution on some of those icons doesn't look great, but on my actual outcome, those didn't look like dots the way they do here on my screen right now. Hopefully on yours, they'll look nice and clear. Um, you can see as you kind of glance through here, I definitely went back and kept adding more things. And so you're going to find that there are, um, oh, there's some more stars, that filler that I mentioned, some loop-de-loops. There's some little excitement lines around some things that takes up a little bit of space. But there's also a couple of um, Easter egg kind of things in there too. And so that's something that I also think is really fun to see if students notice, if they think it's funny. I guess it amuses me, if nothing else. And so in this case, there's a little sumo wrestler guy in here. There's some little icons that are playing Quidditch. In the things I love, one, there was a Stanley Cup spilling because it's a thing with the adults in my building how much we dislike Stanley Cups because it seems like the kids are spilling them everywhere all of the time, and we wish that they were not in our buildings at this point. But point being, it is fun to add a couple of things in there too that are just kind of like a fun one-off, see if somebody notices kind of thing. Um, on this next slide, you can see here an alternate thing that you could do is to add some kind of logo or other thing in the center of the page that will reduce the amount of things that you have to put on it. And in my case, since I did this at the end, I deleted things. However, that did give me the ability to tell you how many fewer items I needed to fill the page. And so in this case, I was able to take 50 items off of the page by having a logo in the center. And so if you put that on from the beginning, again, build out away from it, fill in, it definitely would reduce the amount of time that you had to spend on filling up that space. Another thing that you could do here, the difference between these is simply the size. And so I sized everything up in this version to show that you could make things larger and it still have a pretty good hunting situation. Um, on both of these, I don't plan to use them, but what I did do is I got rid of the numbers in front of those icons because I had deleted things. And so I did not count which ones, as I did that, were part of that key. And so in this version, you would publish it without the numbers, and maybe it's a mystery that they are finding out how many there are, instead of knowing from the beginning how many they're searching for. And I do think it works both ways. My students liked it fine without the numbers on it, and they liked it fine with them. So I think both of those are good options. But you can make things larger, fill in the space more with the size versus quantity. And that is a totally viable way to do this as well, especially because we all have limited time on our hands. And I know that this session is something that when you look at it, you might think like, that's super neat, but I don't have time to do that. So a couple of things. One, that's the beauty of this group that we're all in here, is that we're sharing our work with one another, and it gives you the ability to pull something that somebody else has done without having to put in the time yourself. So whether that's a template that another librarian in the group shares, or if it's you sharing with somebody else, I think we all appreciate one another's work. But you could also have this as a little project that you just work on here and there. If it does seem like something that's very large for you, that you can then just pull it up when you maybe want to do it for fun. So making them larger totally works just as well as the smaller version. One of the things that has been asked about a lot when I've shared my templates is the size. And so I do make a custom size document, not document because I'm not using doc. I make a custom size design of the 11 by 8.5 so that it is a regular piece of paper size. However, I also do use Magic Switch to create a poster size version of it after I'm done. And so there's a couple of things that you can do with that, because our largest poster size that we're blessed with a print shop in my district, and they will print large format for us. And so they can do up to 24 by 36. So I usually just go ahead and size it up to that. And then I fill in the edges a little bit. If it's one where it's lines and you're not telling them a number, you could add more icons to it. I just like to add a little design running down the sides to kind of fill in the space and make it a little bit interesting and not just blank white. But you wouldn't have to do that. You could just cut off those edges at however it fills that page naturally. You may have to do a little nudging around again after it resizes. Um, Magic Switch to resize, I do want to say also, is resize moved into that menu after they made a lot of their AI upgrades and changes in the last few months. And so Magic Switch resize is part of that pro feature that's free with your educator account. And so as an educator, I have used their option to upgrade to a free educator account that gives me access to those features. And so for those of you who maybe have not done that yet, even if you have an existing account on their page, you can choose to get verified and it will just grant educator access to your existing account. So I definitely recommend that. Um, there's also been times where I've shared projects that somebody has noted had premium content. I don't always realize that that's what I'm choosing because it is part of my free educator access. And so just know that if you are either using a template that somebody shares and it has those, you can delete those items and replace them with things that are free. Or again, if you're an educator, definitely take advantage of that free access because it really makes using everything in Canva very easy. That brings us to the end of the ISpy. But I did say projects galore at the end of that. And so I just have two very short other things that I want to share with you very quickly. And so the first of those is making bookmarks. I like to make bookmarks. Again, I like to make things timely and relevant. I hope that they're fun for my students to pick up. And so, for example, this week, after finding out that the Chiefs would be going to the Super Bowl, I made bookmarks for that, printed them, and like one of the Taylor Swift ones were gone in a hot second. And so my students are so excited to see those. And so I make those, again, custom size design of 11 by 8.5. And I have put on my template page boxes that are 2 inches by 6 inches. And so those make about the perfect size of bookmark. That is the same size that I believe most of the bookmarks you buy from Demco are going to be sized. Unless it's scratch and sniff, those are a different size. But I can't make, well, I don't know if I can make scratch and sniff. I'm assuming I can't, but who knows? Maybe that's something I could do. But 2 by 6. And then I fill in with whatever it is that I want to put on that particular set of bookmarks. So I use the same template every time, and I fill in those items with whatever fun things that I think my students might be interested in. I've done Valentine's Day, I've done these Chiefs ones, I've done winter and Halloween, and all kinds of things. And so I print them on cardstock. I go to share, download, PDF, and then I print that PDF out just like I would anything else. And again, that is all part of the educator access that makes all of that completely possible. But ultimately, even though I still order nicer bookmarks for my kids, the ones that are timely and relevant, a lot of times are the ones that they choose first over a super fun design that I've spent much more money on from a vendor. But I like to have both. I think it just opens up lots of options for them. The other thing that people have asked me is how I have made them this size. So I kind of already covered that because I made my own template. But I also wanted to show that you can take a design that is one of the Canva bookmark templates and put it into these. So they are also sized at 2 by 6. And so in this example, I took the reading list template, I hit customize, opened it up, copied it out of there, and pasted it into my same document that I used to make all of mine. And so what I did is I pasted it 5 times into those boxes, gave them each a unique individual background. And so now when I download this, it's not going to be that single bookmark like PNG or JPEG the way it is when you use the built-in templates, which I prefer to be able to print them this way. This makes more sense for me to have them all on one page in the beginning. And I was able to make a couple little different changes on a couple of them. In this case, you can see that left-hand one. I made one that said Book Talk told me to read these. I haven't printed these yet. I made it for this presentation just to be able to show the example. But I'm actually really excited to make the Book Talk told me to read these one because I have so many kids all the time that are asking me for books that they saw on TikTok. And so lots of them keep a running list of things they've seen there that they're looking for to read. And so I think that this will be a super neat thing to go ahead and print for my kids, even though it was originally just for the sake of the presentation. So good thing for me. I am not going to be able to do the coloring page option because I ran out of time. But just know that also using line art and the same types of things that we did with the icons and the ISpy lettering on the page with the logo that had the hollow effect used on the words ISpy. Um, you can make really neat coloring pages with big oversized line art that they can color in the background. Excuse me, goodness. And make some really neat coloring pages as well. Sorry about that. Both running out of time, and the way I recorded this meant that it wasn't actually possible. So sorry that there's a page there that I'm not covering. And then lastly, here is my contact information. You are more than welcome to ask me questions on Facebook within our Canva librarian and teacher group. You can also find me on social media. If you use the link tree listed here, that will give you links to my social media as well as the ISpy pages that you saw here tonight, and some of the bookmarks as well. I hope that was helpful. I was trying to fit it all in and make sense within 30 minutes. And so please ask me questions if anything did not make sense to you, because I for sure want to be helpful and for this to have been a good use of our time. So thank you so much. Enjoy and let me know if you make any super awesome I Spies.